The frozen market, why American housing is broken and who pays for it here, is something that should be mathematically impossible. The United States housing market just posted its lowest transaction volume since 1995. Fewer homes are selling right now than at any point in 30 years. And simultaneously, home prices are sitting near all-time highs. Fewer people buying, higher prices. At the same time, in any functional market, those two forces cancel each other out. That is how supply and demand works. Prices fall when demand falls. You learned this in middle school. So did everyone else. And yet here we are. The market is frozen. The prices are extraordinary. The average first-time buyer is now 40 years old. And if you have tried to buy a home recently, you already know something is fundamentally, structurally wrong. You just cannot quite name what. This is what happened. Every domino, in order, with the actual numbers. The numbers that built the problem. The median existing home price in 2025 sits at approximately $418,000. In 2019, it was $272,000. That is a 46% increase in 6 years. Not in New York, not in San Francisco. Nationally, the dead middle of the entire country. Mortgage rates are sitting around 6.5%. That sounds manageable until you remember that in early 2021, you could get a 30-year fixed mortgage for 2.65%. That is not just a lower rate. That is a completely different financial planet. Here is what the gap means in actual dollars. Same house. $400,000 purchase price. 20% down. $320,000 mortgage. At 2.65%. The monthly principal and interest payment is $1,293. At today's 6.5%, that same loan costs $2,023 per month. That is $730 more every single month for 30 years, for the same house, the same school district, the same square footage. And that same house costs $146,000 more than it did 6 years ago. You are paying more for the loan and more for the house simultaneously. This is not bad luck. It is the output of a very specific sequence of decisions and shocks that compounded on top of each other over 5 years. How it was built, 2020 to 2022. The year is 2020. The Federal Reserve, in an act of emergency monetary policy, cuts rates to essentially zero and begins purchasing approximately $120 billion in bonds and mortgage-backed securities every single month. By January 2021, the 30-year fixed mortgage rate hits 2.65%, the lowest recorded in 5 decades. People who had been uncertain about buying suddenly realized they could afford dramatically more house for the same monthly payment, so they bought, and bought again. But that was only half the fuel. The pandemic fundamentally rewired what Americans needed from their homes. A 700-square-foot apartment that once felt sufficient became an office, a gym, a school, a social environment, and a primary living space simultaneously. Remote work expanded from under 6% of the workforce to over 18% in a matter of months. Millions of people asked a rational question. If I can work from anywhere, why am I paying Manhattan prices to live somewhere I do not actually want to live? They left. Major cities shed hundreds of thousands of households, and all of them moved to Austin, Phoenix, Boise, Nashville. Tampa markets with already limited inventory that suddenly faced a surge of buyers carrying pandemic savings, remote work flexibility, and genuine desperation for more space. National home prices rose 37% between March 2020 and March 2022. In 2 years, Austin climbed 61%, Phoenix 59%, Boise 53%. At the peak, nearly 6,000 homes sold for $100,000 or more above asking price in a single month. If you bought in 2020 or 2021, you'd likely made one of the best financial decisions of your life, almost entirely by accident. That is not skill, that is timing. And for everyone who was not positioned to buy during that window, what happened next made everything dramatically worse. The rate spike that froze everything by mid-2022. Inflation was running at 9.1%, the highest in 40 years. The Federal Reserve responded with 11 rate increases in 16 months, moving from near zero to 5.5%. The fastest tightening cycle in 4 decades. Mortgage rates followed in the worst possible direction. January 2022, 3.22%. October 2022, 7.08%. October 2023, 7.79%. The highest since 2000. On the same houses people had been paying $100,000 over asking for 18 months earlier. To qualify for the median-priced home at today's rates, a buyer needs to earn approximately $106,000 per year. The median household income is $83,700. The average American family is more than $22,000 per year, short of qualifying for the average house. Every quarter-point rate increase prices out an additional 1 to 2 million potential buyers. Home sales fell from 6.12 million in 2021 to just over 4 million in 2025, his slowest sustained period the market has seen since the mid-1990s. We are selling fewer homes today in a country with 100 million more people than 1995 than we sold in 1995. But prices did not fall. The median price hit records in 2024 and has remained near those levels. Demand collapsed and supply collapsed simultaneously, producing something the modern housing market had not experienced before: a total freeze. The lock-in that keeps the market frozen. To understand why prices did not fall when demand collapsed, you need to understand what is quietly holding this entire market hostage. Approximately 51% of all outstanding United States mortgages carry a rate below 4%. Roughly 20% carry a rate below 3%. If you bought in 2020 or 2021 and locked in 2.75%, you are holding a financial instrument that no longer exists. The market cannot recreate it. It is gone. And if you sell your home and buy another one today, you are not simply moving. You are voluntarily surrendering the cheapest money you will almost certainly ever access in your lifetime and replacing it with money that costs more than twice as much per month. Federal Reserve researchers have estimated the average financial penalty of trading an existing low-rate mortgage for a new market-rate mortgage at over $65,000. $65,000 just to leave. The Atlanta Fed found that this effect reduces the probability that a homeowner lists their home for sale by approximately 23%. Other researchers estimated it has suppressed 1.7 million transactions that would otherwise have occurred. Active inventory remains significantly below 2019 levels. Months of supply hovers between 3 and 4. A balanced market requires approximately 6 months of supply. The market is not broken in the sense of collapsing. It is broken in the sense that it has stopped moving, like a door stuck between open and closed, vibrating in place, going nowhere. The human cost. A real person doing everything right. Consider a 31-year-old working in healthcare administration in a mid-sized American city, earning $74,000 per year above the national median income, no credit card debt, a 760 credit score, $31,000 saved over 3 years of genuine discipline, skipped vacations, no new car, a roommate longer than she wanted. By any reasonable measure, she is exactly the person homeownership was designed to serve. Here is what the market offers her in return. The median home in her city is $385,000, with 10% down. Her loan is $346,500, at 6.5%. Monthly principal and interest is approximately $2,190. Add property taxes at $350 per month, insurance at $150, and a basic maintenance reserve at $320. Total monthly ownership cost, approximately $3,010. Her take-home pay is approximately $4,650 per month. Housing would consume 65% of it. She would have $1,640 remaining for food, transportation, health insurance, utilities, student loan payments, and any acknowledgement that she is a human being with a social existence. She cannot afford this home. Not because she has made poor decisions, because the income required to comfortably buy the median home in her market is approximately $110,000 and she earns $74,000. The gap is not a personal failing, it is structural. It is built into the arithmetic before she shows up. There are millions of people in exactly this position, financially solid, culturally told they should own a home by now, systematically excluded by numbers that never appear in the cultural messages telling them to buy. This is what that actually feels like. It does not feel like a crisis. It feels like opening a real estate app for the 16th time this week and saving a listing you know you cannot afford, just to have somewhere to put the feeling. It feels like watching your rent increase in March and realizing your down payment timeline just extended by 3 months. It feels like attending a friend's housewarming and being genuinely happy for them while involuntarily calculating what their monthly payment must be. First-time buyers now make up just 21% of all purchases, a record low in 44 years of tracking. The historical norm is 40%. The median age of a first-time buyer is now 40 years old. In the early 1990s, it was 28. Buying at 40 instead of 30 costs roughly $150,000 in lost lifetime equity from the decade of appreciation missed. Meanwhile, baby boomers make up approximately 42% of all buyers. Half of older boomers are purchasing entirely in cash, proceeds from homes they bought for $200,000 in 1998 that are now worth $700,000, converted directly into all-cash bids that require no mortgage, no rate sensitivity, and no competition with a pre-approval letter. 1 in 6 aspiring buyers has given up on home ownership entirely, not paused. He's given up. A shortage that predates all of it. The supply crisis did not begin in 2020. It was assembled piece by piece over 15 years of underbuilding after the 2008 financial crisis. The United States is short somewhere between 3.5 and 4.5 million housing units. After 2008, construction pulled back sharply and stayed depressed throughout the 2010s, averaging approximately 990,000 housing starts per year against a historical baseline of 1.5 million. What did get built skewed heavily toward the upper end of the market because that is where margins are. The entry-level home under 1,400 square feet, the traditional starting point for first-time buyers, went from over 400,000 units built annually in the 1970s to approximately 65,000 in 2020, an 80% decline. The house that was supposed to be the first rung of the wealth-building ladder for working Americans was essentially discontinued as a product category. Then the pandemic surge arrived, then the rate spike, then recent materials tariffs, adding an estimated $10,000 to $17,500 to the cost of every new home constructed. The supply chain looked at all of this and declined to solve it on anyone's preferred timeline. The supply problem took a decade to create. It will take at least a decade to meaningfully resolve. No policy lever produces 4 million new homes in 2 years. Why this is not 2008? At some point in every housing market conversation, someone asks whether this is 2008. It is not. The reasons matter. In 2006 and 2007, subprime mortgages made up 18 to 21% of all originations. The banking system was making loans to people who could not repay them, based on home values that were partially fictional, using borrowed money stacked against itself with no margin for error. Today, subprime lending represents approximately 3 to 4% of originations. The median credit score at origination is approximately 758, 50 points higher than 2006. In 2009, 26% of all mortgaged properties were underwater, which is what triggers mass defaults, forced sales, and genuine price collapse. Today, approximately 2% are underwater. American homeowners collectively hold approximately $35 trillion in real equity. Foreclosures in 2024 totaled around 174,000. In 2008, they reached 2.3 million. The 2008 crisis happened because banks lent money to unqualified borrowers against inflated valuations. Today, the problem is almost the inverse. The lending is sound. The borrowers are qualified. The equity is real. You still cannot afford anything. This is not a fragile market. It is a frozen, structurally expensive, deeply constrained market. A crash creates buying opportunities. A frozen market mostly continues to exist, absorbing more of people's income, waiting for time to do what policy cannot. What actually comes next? The thing most people are waiting for is a significant drop in mortgage rates. It would genuinely help. Current forecasts suggest rates may end the year between 5.7 and 6.1%. But surveys of existing homeowners find that approximately 37% say they would need rates below 5% before seriously considering a sale. That threshold is not where forecasts point in the near term. The lock-in effect fades naturally over time as people have children, change jobs, retire, or experience life events that make staying impractical, regardless of the financial penalty. The share of mortgages below 4% has already declined from its peak. This slow release is the most realistic path toward a more functional market. But slow is the operative word. Here is the twist almost nobody discusses. A dramatic, rapid rate drop might not immediately solve affordability. It could temporarily worsen it. Millions of buyers are currently on the sidelines. If rates fall to 5% quickly, that accumulated demand returns to the market almost overnight. But supply does not recover overnight. The 3.5 million unit deficit took a decade to create. When concentrated demand hits insufficient supply, prices spike. The same dynamic that drove the 2022 surge could partially repeat at a higher base level. The cure, arriving too quickly, could make the disease temporarily worse before making it better. The most accurate forecast is the boring one, a slow, multi-year period where prices move roughly sideways while incomes gradually rise, with no crash, no dramatic relief, and a lot of difficult personal decisions in between. What to actually do with this? Your frustration is not a misreading of the situation. The income required to comfortably afford the median home is approximately $106,000 per year. The median household income is $83,700. The gap is structural, baked in before you make a single decision. A few things that are actually true and that people with financial stakes in your purchase will rarely say directly. The decision to buy should be based on your real numbers, not the market's narrative, not cultural pressure, not what your parents expect of you by now. If total monthly housing costs, including taxes, insurance, and a basic maintenance reserve, land below 28 to 30% of your gross income, and you plan to stay at least 7 years, buying generally makes financial sense. If the math does not work at that threshold, the math does not work. Stretching to 45% of income because someone tells you now is a great time does not make it a great time. Renting and investing the difference is a completely legitimate strategy that almost no one with a commission structure will suggest to you. In a high-rate, high-price environment, the arithmetic can equal or outperform buying an overpriced asset. This is not a consolation prize. It is a financially coherent choice. If you are buying, new construction deserves serious consideration. We have built a rate incentives that effectively reduce the mortgage rate to 4.5 to 5% are currently real. And the gap between new construction and existing home prices is unusually narrow by historical standards. Verify the incentives are not simply masking an inflated base price, but the math is worth running. The housing market you are navigating is the product of 30 months of historically cheap money, followed by the fastest rate tightening cycle in 4 decades, layered on top of a decade of underbuilding that left the country millions of homes short. The people who need prices to fall are priced out even if they do. The people who need to sell are financially trapped by the very rates that made housing affordable 6 years ago. Everyone is stuck at opposite ends of the same problem for completely opposite reasons. There is no policy, no rate cut, and no product announcement that resolves a structural imbalance this large in a single year. Running the real numbers before signing is not pessimism. It is the only rational approach to a market this expensive, this constrained, and this disconnected from the incomes of the people it is supposed to serve. You are not failing at adulthood. The math is broken. Those are different problems with different solutions.